Greetings and good grief, it's been a great amount of time since I've covered an edutainment game on LGR. So let's rectify that right now, since my two planned hardware videos are unable to be completed at the moment, and this just arrived in the mail, Cross Country USA from 1995. Drive your 18-wheel transcontinental truck and learn coast-to-coast geography the fun way. Yeah, buddy, this is mid-90s American Truck Simulator right here, specifically known as Cross Country USA Home Edition, which was developed and published by Dydatech Software Limited for Macintosh and DOS PCs in 1995. Take the wheel and become a real Rhodes Scholar. Ha! Educational truck puns. Geography is now a real American adventure. You drive an 18-wheel truck across the nation, load cargo, make deliveries to any of 180 different cities. Yeah, this is the most American game made by the most Canadian company. Dydatech out of Burnaby, British Columbia was a Canadian company that may sound familiar if you've seen certain LGR edutainment things of the past. Cross Country Canada for the Apple II and DOS computers is probably the thing that they're most well known for, depending on where you're from. To recap what I've talked about in the past, Cross Country Canada came out in 1986 with a DOS version in 1991 that I covered just, almost exactly 10 years ago. Anyway, that was a follow-up to their first game in the series, Cross Country USA, with each game teaching kids about geography by way of big rig truck driving and delivery services. And you know, it's kind of wild. Back then, American Truck Simulator by SCS did not even exist yet. That didn't come out until 2016, almost a year after I made that video. And while that game is great and is pretty much the de facto American trucking simulation experience that only has 16 of the 50 US states in it so far, Cross Country USA has all 50, baby. Well, technically, there's Hawaii and Alaska that you can't actually go to, but you can look at them on the map, and the contiguous 48, yeah, it's all there. And this game is here, thanks to LGR viewer Ryan, who found this while cleaning out his basement over a holiday break, and found this and another game that he says were huge to him as a kid, and packaged exactly as they came from Scholastic, presumably at a book fair, which is just awesome. I love that kind of provenance in a game, and I couldn't say no, especially because I had never seen the box for this one before. In fact, I don't even know if I knew this version existed. See, back when I covered Cross Country Canada in 2015, the mid-90s updated home edition of USA here, that completely slipped by unnoticed. In fact, there was also an educator's edition of this with a scenario editor, randomized missions, custom commodities and gameplay options, and even networked multiplayer features. I have not come across that one whatsoever, and I wouldn't even know about it if it wasn't mentioned both in the manual and in the game. And as that implies, yes, Cross Country USA and the others in its series were really made primarily for schools and teachers and social studies classes for elementary age kids. In fact, by 1993, Dydatech's software was licensed for use in over 11,000 schools in North America alone, with 70% of those sales stemming from schools in the USA. Which is interesting to me because I always assumed that Cross Country Canada was overall more well known in North America and the USA versions were comparatively more niche. But now I kind of question that. This seems to have been rather popular in parts of the US. Though I never heard of it growing up, I never saw it in any form. It was always the Oregon Trail as the go-to school game where you go across the country and bad things happen. But that said, Dydatech Software was doing well enough with US versions that they created an entire new US branch in Seattle and released far more of the cross-country games based in the USA than they did their home country of Canada. So there was Cross Country USA and then California, Texas, even North Dakota. What the heck was going on with North Dakota? They also had their own Carmen Sandiego game. And the North Dakota Department of Public Instruction or whoever must have had a lot of money just lying around. Apparently it cost $55,000 alone just to get the North Dakota edition of Cross Country USA made for them, so the mysteries of the Dakotas. But anyway, that's neither here or there. Let's take a look at this delightful, very rare box, apparently, for Cross Country USA and the stuff inside, which begins with the game on 4 high-density 3.5-inch floppy disks. At least for this version of the game, which is version 1.05a, even though it says 1.0 on the discs. And according to the instruction manual, this version actually came out in 1996. with the rest of it being equally as enlightening, if not more so, covering the many different systems at play in cross-country USA, okay? Like all the different features of your truck, how to operate the thing, maintain it, pick up items, drop stuff off, and navigate the numerous highways, byways, and roads of the 50 states united, minus the 2 that you can't visit. Along with an impressive 16 of the 47 pages in the manual dedicated to troubleshooting and just getting the dang thing to work. Mid-90s DOS games. And last but certainly not least in the box is this fold-out map of the United States. More or less. It's a fictionalized version of its roadways that appear in the game, but because of that, it's actually quite important to have because a regular map won't actually show you all the different places that you can go, like with this other more generic US map that was included in the box from Ryan. It's just a normal US map. It'll show you where the states are, but not the actual places you can visit or any of the roads. But yeah, we got the game installed, so let's get trucking. You start the game up obnoxiously getting honked at. Click anywhere on screen and you're greeted with a Windows 3.1-esque interface, although this is a pure DOS game. And you can choose your mission from the selection of 18 USN files along with a sample file that acts as the tutorial, and there's a whole section of the manual that follows along with this, so it's probably the best one to start with. But not for us. We're going to start with one of the regular missions, and with this you get to choose your name and how many players, 1 or 2. With the latter being the same gameplay, as just each player is swapping out either every 24 hours or after a commodity is picked up.
Have a safe trip, and remember, drive defensively.
You're then given a starting date, either January for winter or July for summer, affecting weather in different parts of the country, as well as your starting location and your first assignment. With the initial commodity in the very first mission being maple syrup, of course. Canadians are the best, they can't help themselves. After this, you're brought to the map screen showing where you are and the available roads from your current location, alongside a few different stats and facts about your city and state, which don't have a lot to do with anything in the game, but it's educational and you gotta have this stuff. Really, the most pertinent information is what commodity is distributed where, and the best way to get that information is page 20, right in the middle of the manual, showing all the different cities and the different things that are distributed at each one. So for some of that sweet, sexy maple syrup, you gotta go to Burlington, Vermont. Which means either navigating the individual maps for each state within the game, or better yet, just referencing that fold-out map that it came with, which shows all the different cities and generally the routes between them. Then once you know where you're gonna go, you can hop into the cockpit of your truck and start clicking around on things. Yeah, in an improvement over the earlier cross-country games, this is fully mouse-driven if you want. There is still a text parser at the bottom of the screen for typing in every command if you want to, but why would you do that when you got a mouse? So click Start to turn the key for the ignition. Click the appropriate cardinal direction on the compass to travel that way. Oh, and of course, buckle your seatbelt. Come on now, we're Canadian-American truckers, not cavemen. Then click the gas pedal button and off you go on to whatever happens next. And I do mean whatever happens next. In very much Oregon Trail fashion, it's a pretty random set of events in between different locations. Now, you're not going to be crapping yourself to death from dysentery or anything, but you are going to be running across multiple less deadly, less smelly challenges. For instance, flat tires. Yeah, if you get one of those, just go into your glove box, click the maintenance book, and change the tire. Simple as that. You've just lost a bit of time is all. Or you may run into inclement weather, either rain or snow, so turn on your windshield wipers to be able to see, and consider installing chains on your tires for snow. Otherwise you risk sliding off the road and crashing. Just don't use them in the summer, otherwise the fuzz will freak out and force you off the road to foist on you a financial fine. And Smokey charges even more if you're not wearing your seatbelt, or if you're speeding. Which, yeah, whether or not you're transporting 400 cases of Coors across state lines, breaking the speed limit is totally an option by double-clicking the gas pedal, taking you to a delightful 90-mile-an-hour cruising speed. How educational. Speeding gets you to your destination faster, of course, but it also uses more fuel, meaning more frequent gas station stops. edutainment, law-breaking, and risk-taking. You gotta love it. The more you risk, the greater your potential reward, and the greater chances for failure. Like with those gas stations, right? You're guaranteed one at every city, but what if you run low on the open road? Well, you can try stopping anywhere to see if there's a station nearby, but typically there's not. So you might end up having to call a tow truck to bring you a bit of fuel for double the price, so you can make it to the next city and find a proper pumping station. Then sometimes, in between picking up your usual loads, you'll be presented a chance to earn a bonus by going out of your way to pick up an additional commodity, which may or may not be worthwhile depending on how far out of the way it is, something up to you to calculate and decide. And then there's hunger and fatigue, with you as the driver needing to pull over for food and sleep. It may be repetitious making dozens of stops at the same identical restaurant and motel at every city in the country, watching the same unskippable animation every time you eat them up, but it beats the heck out of the alternative, which is that the more you go without grub and shut-eye, the more the risk of crashing increases, and nobody wants that. Sure hope you're wearing your seatbelt, because if not, the Dragon Wagon will charge you double for repairs. Seems a bit strange, but the law is the law. If you don't buckle up, then trucks cost more to fix, as everyone knows. Another hard-earned lesson comes in the form of hitchhikers, represented by these long-haired dudes on the side of the road. And most of the time, transporting them goes off without a hitch, and they politely take a hike once they reach their destination. Other times, they hold you at gunpoint and steal your cargo for no real reason other than because they can. I don't even think they tip you extra cash in this version, or at least I've never seen it happen, so just ignore them entirely, I say. Although you may still get robbed if you forget to lock the truck while sleeping, so it pays to stick to a rigid routine. Wear your seatbelt while driving, lock the doors while you're sleeping, and turn off the truck too, otherwise it'll run all night and use more fuel. Although if you choose to save a bit of cash and sleep in your truck instead of a hotel, then leaving it turned on in the winter makes sense, as that leaves the heater going. Yeah, it's all these details that immediately endeared me to cross-country Canada a decade ago. And with USA Home Edition, it's the same thing and then some. All the variables and chances for things to go wrong makes you forget that it's such a simple educational simulation. Like, there's not even a steering wheel, there are no curves or turns anywhere, yet there are still enough irregularities that it makes every scenario feel unique. Like how mountainous parts of the country burn more fuel due to higher inclines, or how weather and sunlight change depending on whether you're in the north or the south. And how time zones change across state lines, meaning that you have to adjust your dashboard clock accordingly. Otherwise, you may end up off schedule to delivery locations and meals, since commodity warehouses and restaurants have their own working hours, and if you arrive too early or too late, you'll be stuck waiting around with nothing to do. Except maybe listen to the radio, which has its own frequencies that are tuned in differently depending on your location, meaning that presets from one area don't work in another. It's no truckers.fm, but it's a nice touch.
Now today's weather. A low pressure system moving over the entire region. Before we continue with the history of the rutabaga, a short word from our sponsor.
Hi there, friends. My name is Joe Pell. I'm on Taste Them here down on Wild Track Motors. I've got a deal for you today. You don't believe me? You come down here and see it.
Now today's weather.
Unfortunately, you don't get any music. Not really anyway. Only a short snippet that sometimes plays while tuning into the weather report or whatever. In fact, you can't use the radio at all while driving, which is disappointing. Also, a bit of a letdown is the fact that there are so few visual changes from place to place. And having a little image for cities and landmarks would be a nice feature, like what Oregon Trail does. Heck, even the older Apple II cross-country games had little line art illustrations to go along with each city, so not having anything beyond a map and some text here is just unfortunate. And it doubles down on the text too, with these little quizzes every time you receive a new delivery request. It gives you several hints and there's no way to fail, but it's something, I guess. I just wish there were some fun little graphics to go along with it. That said, the graphics that Cross Country USA Home Edition does have are delightful in their own way, and the overall experience is still surprisingly engaging. Traveling from state to state, collecting beer and tobacco and computers and uranium and whatever, while trying to devise the fastest, most optimized route by reading the map and calculating risks for fuel, sleep, and hunger. It's just a good time in my book. It's nowhere near as involved as it could be, but it's not meant to be a full business sim. It's an educational title meant to help school kids learn some basic geography and planning skills, and get a higher score than their classmates, of course. But regardless of your score, you're rewarded with a virtual vacation either way, so even if you crashed 50 times without a seatbelt while starving to death and passing out constantly after being held up at gunpoint, a win is a win. Enjoy your vacation. And that's about it for Cross Country USA, the 1995/96 home edition. And man, is it one of those edutainment titles I wish I knew about back in the day. It's exactly the type of pseudo-simulation game that I've always enjoyed. And while it's a bit more simplistic in its presentation than I'd prefer, especially regarding the lack of location-specific graphics, there's an undeniable charm to what's here. It looks like a souped-up Windows 3.1 shareware game with those 16-color VGA graphics that look like they were drawn by whoever at the company had any experience at all with digital artwork. And I mean, that tracks. Despite noteworthy success in the edutainment market, Daidatech remained a small company, only employing like a dozen people when they made this version of Cross Country USA. And it doesn't seem like they expanded too greatly either, even by the time they released follow-ups in the form of Cross Country USA 2 in 2002 and Cross Country USA Photo Safari in 2003. And I guess it worked out for them since they're still around, sort of, just under a different name. Daidatech became Ingenuity Works in 1998, who are still in business in Vancouver and still releasing new versions of all the right type, which they've done since 1989. Respect. Though they seem to have stopped working on or selling all their other properties, including the Cross Country series, and that's a darn shame, because I could just imagine what a newer, more involved entry might look like 30 years later here in 2025. Honestly, American Truck Simulator would benefit from a few of its features, like a hunger mechanic, seatbelt safety, and hitchhikers packing heat. It's all about the little things, you know? And if anyone has a copy of the elusive Teacher's Edition with all the extra customization and networking features, please get in touch or upload it somewhere. That'd be the ultimate version if we could find it. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this retrospective and do stick around for new LGR things coming soon. And as always, thanks for watching.
A cruiser's en route to your locale. Just hang tight and we'll be there soon.